Welcome back, everybody. Thank you for listening to the Always Talking Crime podcast. This is Kimi. I'm super excited about episode number 5 already. But I wanted to jump on here before I start telling you the story because I needed to give everyone a major disclaimer about the severity of the murder that we're going to be talking about. There are not enough adjectives to describe how absolutely horrifying and gruesome this murder is. So we're going to be talking about child abuse. We're going to be talking about domestic violence. We're going to be talking a lot about torture and murder. So I just wanted to let y'all know that if you've ever been subjected to domestic violence or torture or things like that, anything of that nature, you may not want to listen to this episode. But then again, you clicked on this for a reason. So I'm assuming that you are a lover of true crime, so it's not going to bother you. I just wanted to let you know that this story is going to be so gruesome that I'm not even sure that I'm going to be able to give everyone enough trigger warnings so that you can skip ahead if there are certain things that you don't want to hear, okay? So there's your trigger warning right there. Let's get on with the story, shall we? All right, true crime lovers. So we are going to be talking about James Patterson Smith and the murder of Kelly Ann Bates. Now, I went back and forth on how I was going to start this episode, and I'm choosing to start with a little background history on James Patterson Smith instead of starting with the victim. But I will be talking a lot. The majority of this episode will be speaking about the victim and her family, okay? I just want to start off by, telling everybody what a huge, massive piece of fucking shit this person is, this man is, if you can call him a man. So anyways, James Patterson Smith was born in 1947. He is serving jail time. I hope he's never going to get out. He's still alive right now. At the time of the beginning of this story, he was unemployed, he was divorced, and he was living in the Gorton area of Manchester, England. He was described by acquaintances as being house-proud and well-groomed. He wasn't a smoker, and he was described as a teetotaler. His marriage had ended in 1980 after 10 years because he had been violent towards his wife. Big surprise, right? His next relationship was with 20-year-old Tina Watson. And between the years of 1980 and 1982, he pretty much used her as a punching bag, and he even subjected her to severe beatings while she was pregnant with his child. So yes, guys, this person, this murderer, does have a child because she did go on to, have a healthy baby. But Tina had said, at first it was just now and again, just a little tap. But in the end, it was every day. He would smack me in the face or hit me over the head with an ashtray. He would kick me in the legs or even between the legs. Tina managed to escape from the relationship, during which James Patterson Smith had also attempted to drown her while she was bathing. Remember that, guys. When that relationship came to an end in 1982, Smith then started seeing 15-year-old Wendy Mottershed, whom he obviously, also abused. Like, we didn't know that was going to happen, right? In one attack, he held Wendy's head underwater in the kitchen sink in an attempt to drown her. And again, remember that. It's foreshadowing for sure. So in 1993, when his relationship with Wendy ended, he began grooming Kellyanne Bates when she was only 14 years old. He met Kellyanne while she was babysitting for friends. So I have no idea, because in my research, nothing ever explains like how James Patterson Smith met, knew like the people that she had been babysitting for. Like, I don't know if they were friends, acquaintances. I mean, it sounds like he didn't have any friends and he just, knew people. I don't know if he just happened to be a passerby and, that's how he met her when she was on her way home. But basically, he walked her home after she was done babysitting one night. They began seeing each other secretly at 14 years old. And the crazy thing is that he was much older. He was much, much older. And I will tell you how much older, in a little while, okay? But he was much older. He had no business, literally dating this child. But basically, he needed somebody that he could groom. Kellyanne Bates was born on May 18th, 1978. Now, she could pretty much do whatever she wanted, even at age 14. So I know I didn't have that liberty when I was her age. I don't want to say anything about, I don't want to say anything negatively about the parenting, because I know that these parents have actually, gone through like many, many years of torment after everything that had happened to Kellyanne. So, I don't want to victim shame or family shame, but, I can't lie and say that, I agree with it. I was like totally shocked to learn, how much freedom this 14-year-old child had at this time. So she was basically able to come and go whenever she pleased. I guess like James Patterson Smith had called the home back when there were landlines. Do you guys remember? Some of you probably don't even know about the landlines before cell phones came out. But he would call the home on the landline, and, her mom had heard his voice, but never really noticed how much older his voice sounded, right? So they trusted her. Her mom, Margaret, had said that Kellyanne was always really sporty and super social. She was a little bit of a tomboy. She could give as good as she got with her two brothers. So she could definitely stand up for herself. But she noticed that, this guy would be calling all the time, and, they knew that she was probably going to gravitate towards somebody older, but I'm sure that they were kind of thinking like an older teenage boy and not somebody that was, 3 times Kellyanne's age. 3 times. So Kellyanne is 14 and her quote-unquote boyfriend is 3 times that age. But they lied to the parents. Kellyanne lied and told her parents, I've had this boyfriend for about 2 years. He's 32 years old. And that was shocking enough for her parents. So Margaret Bates, told the story about how she returned home to her house one day after work to find her 16-year-old daughter, Kellyanne, standing in the kitchen. she had no idea that Kellyanne had brought her boyfriend home for the first time. And like, she was super shocked when she heard him coming down the steps and walked into the room, because like, he looked even older than 32. Like, she was shocked. So obviously no mother would be happy to learn that their daughter was dating someone so much older than she was. But for Margaret, it went even further than that. So there was something really disturbing about Smith, she said. She said that this wasn't the man I wanted for my daughter. I vividly recall seeing our bread knife in the kitchen and wanting to pick it up and stab him in the back. Margaret would later regret her decision not to stab Smith then and there, because her daughter's relationship with James Patterson Smith would soon end with him torturing and killing her so brutally that the court provided the jurors at his trial with counseling after. And everybody took the court up on that counseling. So, like I told you guys earlier, I mean, it's just horrific, just terrible. So in November 1995, not long after the meeting in the kitchen, Kellyanne moved in with the unemployed Smith in nearby Gorton. I mean, I don't understand how she moved in with him if he was unemployed. Like, how did they live? Maybe he got some kind of assistance. Like, I know here in the States, people can get unemployment or Social Security disability. So I don't know any information on his background as far as that concerned. He had to have some kind of income, because otherwise, how do you eat? How do you have the lights on? How do you, pay for your rent or your mortgage and things like that? So I'm not really sure on that information, but it's really weird, isn't it? So although skeptical, very skeptical, sometimes I get tongue-tied. So the parents were super, super skeptical of Kellyanne's decision, but they agreed on the condition that she keep in regular contact with them. But it didn't take long for their once outgoing daughter to be withdrawn. When she stopped by for a rare visit, her parents both noticed that there were bruises on her arms. So Smith was no different with Kellyanne Bates than he was with the women in his past. He was regularly beating her. But after a few months, the abuse escalated to a terrifying level. I mean, just absolutely terrifying. The true extent of the abuse only became clear on April 16th, when Smith walked into the Gorton police station and said he'd accidentally killed Kellyanne Bates after their argument while she was in the bath and caused her to drown. Remember? He tried to drown the women that he was in relationships with previously. So that was exactly how he framed what had happened to the police. So, he framed it as an accident, which is crazy, because when the authorities found Kellyanne's body inside Smith's house, her injuries told a much, much darker story. So here's a trigger warning, guys. I need to tell you that the pathologist who examined Kellyanne's body found more than 150 injuries that were inflicted over a period of at least a month. So in the weeks leading up to her death, Smith was starving Kellyanne and even kept her tied to a radiator by her hair. I forgot to mention that when the police first went to Smith's address and found Kellyanne, her naked body was in a bedroom. So it wasn't even in the bathtub. So if she had accidentally died, drowned in the bathtub after an argument, that makes no sense. But her blood was found everywhere, in every room of the house. And that pathologist said that in his career, he had examined almost 600 victims of homicide, but he had never come across injuries so extensive as Kellyanne's. Another trigger warning, guys. These were the following injuries on poor Kellyanne's body. She had scalding to the buttocks and her left leg. She had burns on her thigh that were caused by a hot iron. Terrifying. She had a fractured arm. She had multiple stab wounds that were caused by knives, forks, and even scissors. There were stab wounds inside her mouth. Like some of these things, it's just hard for me to even say. There were stab wounds inside her mouth, though. That's just crazy. Both of her hands were crushed. There was mutilation of her ears, her nose, her eyebrows, her mouth, her lips, and her genitalia. There were wounds on her body that were caused by a spade and pruning shears. This is, I don't know what's the worst part. I was just going to say this is the worst part, but everything is equally terrifying and almost unbelievable that this happened. But she had both of her eyes gouged out. And then later, there were stab wounds to the empty eye sockets. The last thing they noticed, that part of her scalp, like she had been partially scalped. So the pathologist determined that her eyes had been removed not less than 5 days and not more than 3 weeks before her death. Patterson had been starving her. Kellyanne had lost about 20 kilograms in weight, and she hadn't received any water for several days before her death. So she was super dehydrated for sure. Which, I mean, that just seems like the least of her worries after everything else that was going on. Like, I just can't even believe that somebody did this to another human being. I really can't understand. I can't understand it. So the prosecutor in Smith's trial said it was as if he deliberately disfigured her, causing her the utmost pain, distress, and degradation. The injuries were not a result of one sudden eruption of violence. They must have been caused over a long period and were so extensive and so terrible that the defendant must have deliberately and systematically tortured the girl. So, like, these things, like, he was trying to say that she had died because, like, they got into an explosive argument, you know, and she accidentally died. But that's fucking bullshit, because he had been torturing her for a good month. So the cause of death was drowning immediately prior to which she had been beaten about the head with a shower head. So he beat her in the head with a shower head first, and then she drowned. And then he must have moved her body into the bedroom because that's where the police found her. Sorry, guys, I just had to stop for a second because I was starting to get really, really upset. I've been a victim of domestic violence myself. Nothing as terrifying as this, but this is just so scary to me, and it makes me so sad and upset that, you know, women, especially, I don't even want to say especially young women, but women, and I guess men do too, but I can't see like a woman torturing a man for a month. I guess it could happen, but since I've been in a situation like this, I just can't imagine how much she must have been gaslit and all these different things, like verbally abused. Like, I'm sure that he was telling her that, you know, if she tried to leave, nobody was going to help her. Nobody would care. Her parents didn't care about her. And there's nothing in my research that says, you know, that those things happen, but just based on my own experiences and what it was like to be with, you know, a couple different people in my past were very abusive to me. And sometimes the verbal and the emotional stuff can be worse than the physical stuff. Now, these physical things that had happened, all this torture, that's insane. But I'm just saying that, there's so much horrific physical domestic violence and torture that I'm sure there was also a lot of psychological abuse and a lot of verbal abuse. So I'm sure that Kellyanne didn't feel like she had anybody to turn to. He kept her away from her family. Her mother, Margaret, still has the leaflets on domestic abuse, but she never had a chance to give it to Kellyanne because the contact was so sporadic during her relationship with Smith. And, the parents didn't get to see Kellyanne very often. Kellyanne did call at Christmas to say she and Smith were in Blackpool. I think that's where they were. So she wouldn't be around. So she wasn't going to be able to spend Christmas with them. On March 10th, 1996, Margaret did speak to Kellyanne to tell her off for missing a dental appointment. So Kellyanne just didn't go to the dentist appointment. I don't know if she forgot or if she just wasn't allowed to go. She was kept from it. I'm sure she was just freaking being tortured to death. But that was actually the last conversation that they had ever had. The Sunday after that was Mother's Day. And Margaret recalls that Kellyanne promised she was going to come, and they didn't hear from her. Margaret said, "I got a card, but it wasn't her handwriting." The next weekend, the same thing happened on Tommy's birthday. Tommy is the father, is Kellyanne's father. So the next weekend, the same thing happened on Tommy's birthday and on our wedding anniversary. So they would get cards, but it was never her handwriting. It was always Smith's handwriting. And Margaret said that she had said to her husband, "Something is wrong." And again, I don't want to shame the parents because it's not their fault that their daughter died. It's Smith's fault that he killed her. But at the same time, I have kids. I can't fucking imagine. I can't fucking imagine thinking, that something was wrong like this and me not hearing from my kids and, just getting a Mother's Day card in, the dude's handwriting. I would definitely get to the bottom of it. And perhaps in the beginning, when she left and moved in with Smith, she was 16 years old. But that is the legal age of consent, I believe, in England. So it's different here in the United States. You have to be 18 to have, legal consent, from what I understand. But if these things were happening and it was my daughters involved or one of my daughters involved or even my son involved, I would be knocking on that fucking front door and getting to the bottom, especially when you see bruises. There was one time, I guess that Kellyanne had come around back when she was still, allowed to leave the house, that one side of her face was totally black and blue. And Kellyanne had said to her mom that some girls had jumped her after school. She was going to be okay, but it was just a girl fight or bully situation. And, I don't understand how Margaret and Tommy didn't, call bullshit on that. But then again, I'm sure, they have to live. Well, Margaret passed away. I'll talk about that in a minute. But they had to live with that for well over 20 years, 25 years, I believe it's been. But so that's a hell all of its own. So I don't want to say anything oh, it's their fault, because it's definitely not their fault. Is there more that they could have done? Abso-fucking-lutely. And it's all these things that, I would have done, even if it would have made my kids so angry with me that they never wanted to speak to me again. I would absolutely want to make sure, that my kids were safe and that they weren't being harmed. And maybe if they had reached out or showed up at the house or had the cops go to the house, perhaps the torture would not have been as severe, and perhaps Kellyanne could have been saved. I mean, I assume she could have been saved, but sadly she wasn't. So let's go back to talk about Smith for a minute, or probably a few minutes. So that fucking asshole denied murder. How can you fucking deny murder when, okay, so if the victim, Kellyanne, has only been with you, how can you deny that you killed her? She hasn't left the house. Nobody's been to the house. She hasn't talked to anybody, even her own fucking family. How can he deny that it's murder? He claimed Bates would, quote unquote, put me through hell winding me up. He also claimed that Bates had taunted him about his dead mother, and she had a bad habit of hurting herself and making it look worse on me. So he's like trying to blame her for everything. Total fucking gaslighting. Totally shifting the blame to somebody else. But it doesn't even fucking matter. Like what the fuck she did to him. Like say these things were true. Say she was a super toxic girl. Say she was, being a little bitch and taunting him and like starting fights or continuing fights or self-harming. Like who cares? He still fucking tortured her. I'm sure she didn't gouge her own eyeballs out. I'm sure she didn't crush both of her own hands. I heard her kneecap was crushed as well. But she did not do all these things to her fucking self. He did them. The jury at Manchester Crown Court took only 1 hour to find 49-year-old Smith guilty of Kellyanne Bates's murder. They sentenced him to life imprisonment, and the judge recommended that Smith serve a minimum term of 20 years. Like, what the fuck? Minimum of 20 years? Hopefully he never gets out. But I can't understand some of like the prison terms in other countries. Like, do they not have the death penalty? I'm not sure. I didn't really research about that, and I guess I should sometime. But I don't understand how they have a potential to someday get out of prison. I mean, it should just be, lock them up and throw away the fucking key or burn that motherfucker in the electric chair. You know what I mean? Or fill those veins full of that lethal injection. And, you may not agree with me about the death penalty, but what this motherfucker did to Kellyanne, he doesn't even deserve one breath of air when he wakes up in the morning. Like, he just deserves to be gone, like, off of this planet, period. So the judge had stated, this has been a terrible case, a catalog of depravity by one human being upon another. You are a highly dangerous person. You are an abuser of women, and I intend, so far as it is in my power, that you will abuse no more. And like I said, that jury was provided with professional counseling to help them deal with all the distress, because they had to see all the photographs of Kellyanne's injuries and just the sickening, stomach-churning violence of the case. Like, I can't imagine. And guys, I know those pictures are out there, and I can't bring myself to look at anything like that, because just talking about this story is bad enough. There's no way that I want to see the photos, because it's something that I will never be able to unsee. I'm not into like gore porn. So it's just something that I don't ever want to look at. So, and there's another thing too out there that I heard about. It's not even related to this case, but there is there is an incident that I heard of. There was this girl in California. I think they call her the Porsche girl, if I remember right. And if you put that into like a Google search, you're going to see some horrific pictures of a car accident. And I made the mistake one day of searching for it because I'm like, oh, how bad could it be? Guys, it was really, really bad. I didn't see her body, thankfully, because once I saw the condition of the Porsche that she had died in and a lot of the blood that was on scene next to the Porsche, I just knew that was more than enough for me to see, and I didn't need to see her body. But like those pictures are up there too. So that story is just really quickly, I'm going to tell you, that is a story of a teenage girl that, lived in California. She was a rich girl. She came from, a very, very wealthy family, and she was probably a bit spoiled. I don't even remember on the top of my head what her real name is right now, but she snuck her dad's Porsche, and I think she was like all drugged up, like she was like snorting cocaine, and I don't really know anything about drugs besides weed because I've never done drugs, but she was on this crazy high using cocaine and was driving at an extremely fast pace, and she crashed. I don't know if she was coming onto the interstate or if she was like on the off ramp. I think she was on the off ramp, but she crashed the Porsche into like a cement like beam or steel beam or something. Some kind of structure was there. And guys, the Porsche, we all know what a Porsche looks like, right? It was smashed so bad that there was barely anything left to it. Just know that it was a terrible sight. I mean, the whole front end, actually past the driver's seat was gone. It was just smashed. Like it was like a little teeny tiny smashed up piece of steel, and that's it. And like the amount of blood and everything that was there on the ground outside of the car, that itself was so terrifying to see that like it made me sick, and there was no way that I wanted to like look up any more photos of her body because like I had heard on Reddit about how like totally horrific the pictures were. So, so just like that, I'm going to urge everybody not to be, searching up any photos of Kellyanne's injuries because I don't think, like I said already, I don't think it's anything that anybody, needs to have in their head. So anyways, on my Instagram, I'm going to be posting some pictures of Kellyanne and her parents, and I'll post a picture of the motherfucker Patterson as well, or Patterson Smith. I'll post a picture of him too, because when you see what he looks like, you're going to be like, what the fuck did this like teenage girl even see in him? Because like he's like yuck. Like I'm not all about looks. Like I like my men to look nice, but that wouldn't be the only thing I would judge them on. But this guy is like old and nasty, and like I said already, he didn't even have a fucking job, and he wasn't even nice to her. I'm sure he started out nice to her while he was grooming her, but like when you see this picture, you're just going to be like, oh, yuck. He's nasty. So nasty. So anyways, like I mentioned, Kellyanne's mom, Margaret, did pass away. She passed away right before Christmas in the year 2020. She had battled breast cancer twice, and she had radiotherapy treatment, battling cancer, and that reportedly diminished her immune system. She also had asthma, but she ended up dying in the hospital on December 17th of 2020 due to a respiratory failure. Since she had asthma, her immune system, she didn't have any immunity, after the radiotherapy, like her immunity was done for. So basically anything, any kind of crud or bug that was going around, Margaret was going to get it because she didn't have immunity. Her husband, Tommy, said she was always saying, "I want to get back with Kelly." So I think it's awesome that her and Kelly Ann are back together now. They're in heaven. They're not in pain anymore. I'm sure that was just such a happy reunion, when Margaret passed away and was able to be with Kelly Ann again. I believe in things like that. I'm not sure, what all of you believe in, but that's absolutely what I believe in. Margaret had always been very popular with the customers at her job. And she worked at a place called Tesco, which I believe is like maybe a grocery store or convenience store. But I guess all the friends and customers paid tribute to Margaret after she passed away. Amy Fisher wrote, "What can you say about this lady other than she was one of the loveliest ladies I've ever met?" Someone else said, "Lovely golden heart, time for anyone. Rest in peace with your girl." Leighton McMyler said, "She always had a smile for everyone and was so warm and friendly. I could always have a nice chat and a laugh with her." So rest in peace, Margaret. Could you imagine how this could have had a much different outcome if Kellyanne would have just not been so stubborn and would have listened to her parents and come home? But I mean, like I said, I've been in that situation before, with domestic abuse. And I had friends trying to get me to leave one of my perpetrators, one of my abusers. And I was just so trauma bonded to him. And it wasn't even anything to the extent of this story, this situation. But I was just in love. And I try to tell people that if they haven't experienced domestic violence, they don't understand the patterns of abuse. So I'm sure those last 30 days were horrific, and the abuse probably never stopped. It was probably ongoing. But, in the time before all that happened, I'm sure there were instances of violence or abuse, whether it be verbal abuse, emotional abuse, whatever kind of abuse. But then there's the honeymoon phase where the abuser, goes to great lengths to, promise you that it will never happen again. They love you, sometimes they gaslight you and, make you feel like, well, if you wouldn't have done this, then I wouldn't have had to do this. So, I mean, it's such a terrifying thing for anyone to have to suffer through. And I'm just horrified by the fact that this young girl, this teenage girl, I think back to how I was when I was 17. I know I wouldn't have listened to my parents, but I can't imagine going through all of these horrible things at such a young age. I mean, I can't even imagine going through it now. And I'm much older than that now. But yeah, so this was a rough one, wasn't it, guys? It was rough, and I really appreciate you guys listening to my podcast. I'm having a blast doing this. I'm already excited about next week's episode, and the episode after that, and 100 episodes after that. So if you have not already shared this podcast with your friends, please do. I have some exciting things in the pipeline for the near future where there's going to be extra bonus episodes for people, that they can hear, so you don't have to wait an entire week to hear a new episode. I'm going to be working on 1 or 2 bonus episodes per month. Later on down the road, I even want to do like a story, do an episode live on Zoom or, some other way. So I have some great ideas, for our future. I'm building up the community now. So if you can help me build this true crime community of people that are always talking crime, I would so appreciate it. I am on Instagram. It's Always Talking Crime Podcast. I don't really do much on Facebook, so I do not have a Facebook group. So I'm pretty much just focusing on Instagram right now. I was thinking about doing a TikTok account, but I haven't done that yet. I'm just focusing on creating content for you right now before I exhaust myself doing all these different social media platforms. So because of that, I really need you guys to help me spread the word about this podcast. Give everybody the Spotify link or the Podbean link, whichever one. Please rate my podcast. That's a huge thing. If you rate it and review it, that's going to bump it up with Spotify and Podbean. I'm still working on getting it on Apple Podcasts. I think it's on Google Podcasts right now. I haven't looked, but I remember getting an email from Google saying it was on that platform as well. So, guys, just help me spread the word. I'm going to be able to give you guys so much fun. Well, I think true crime is fun, as long as I'm not the victim. But I love these stories. I'm a little obsessed. I'm nerdy. I think my boyfriend is seriously getting scared because I'm constantly listening to podcasts. I listen to a podcast in the morning while I'm walking the dogs. I listen at work, whenever I can get away with it. I love watching the true crime documentaries on Netflix and Hulu and wherever I can find them. I know you're like that too. If you found this little tiny podcast, I know you've got to be somebody like that too. So please help me out. In addition, if you have any certain cases that you want me to cover, shoot me an email at alwaystalkingcrimepodcast@gmail.com. I would love to research a case just for you and talk about it in the future. All right, so if you guys need me, you know where to find me. And until next week, keep talking crime.